House Select Committee investigating the January 6th attack on the Capitol has subpoenaed 5 Republican congressmen, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Now, congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has been following this investigation for us from Capitol Hill. Scott, very good to see you. Good morning.
Hey, Anne-Marie, we're now nearly a year into this House Select January 6th committee investigation, and there is a new significant escalation. A crime and attack unlike any in American history has led to a congressional investigation unlike any other. Now, after nearly 1,000 interviews, the January 6th Select Committee has its sights on 5 Republican congressmen, each of whom has refused to appear voluntarily, including the GOP leader in the House, Kevin McCarthy. The committee knows McCarthy spoke with then-President Trump before, during, and after the attack, something he talked about during an interview with CBS News on January 6th.
I've spoken to the president. I asked him to talk to the nation to tell him to stop this.
McCarthy says the current investigation is not legitimate, and the committee acknowledges these subpoenas mark an unprecedented moment.
An attempted coup and a violent insurrection at the Capitol interrupting the peaceful transfer of power are unprecedented events.
As for the other members called, Alabama's Mo Brooks gave a fiery speech before Trump at the White House ellipse January 6th.
Today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass.
The committee says Ohio's Jim Jordan talked to Trump on the 6th and texted White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows earlier about blocking the electoral count, and that Congressman Andy Biggs and Scott Perry were both involved in discussions related to efforts to overturn the 2020 election.
This is all about distracting America from their abysmal record of running America into the ground.
All 5 congressmen have criticized the subpoenas and called this committee politicized, with 7 Democrats and 2 Republicans. The committee hasn't said what happens if these congressmen defy the subpoena, whether they'll be referred for contempt of Congress. But we do know the committee's hearings are set to begin June 9th, and Anne-Marie, a final report is likely just a few weeks later.
So what are sort of the next steps for the January 6th House Committee then?
Preparing for those hearings.
Right.
There are likely to be 8 or 9 of them, each with a different focus, each led by a different member of the committee. They're also still trying to talk to Mark Meadows, the former chief of staff, and Rudy Giuliani, and Peter Navarro, the former trade advisor. There have been others who've defied subpoenas. They want to get those interviews done, likely before the first hearing, which again is set for June 9th.
I don't know if we know this or not, but do we know if any of these congressmen that are being called to talk, both voluntarily and, I guess, involuntarily subpoenaed, if the public will get to hear what they have to say?
At the public hearings? It's a great question. We don't know the answer yet. The committee hasn't announced final witness lists. But the way this is moving, the trajectory it's on right now, Anne-Marie, it feels like the hearings are going to include witnesses who are willing to choreograph and work with the committee. There doesn't appear to be a stage being set yet for a grilling of unwilling witnesses to punch and counterpunch. There's time for that to change, but there's been no indication from the committee that unwilling witnesses will be sitting beneath the bright floodlights of a primetime January 6th Select Committee hearing.
And what's the latest update on the prosecution?
There are now 800 criminal defendants in this prosecution, but there are potentially hundreds more to come. Our latest check of the court filing shows about a third of them have pleaded guilty. There are about 2/3, more than 500, still waiting on trials. And Anne-Marie, they are now setting trial dates as late as May 2023 due to the backlog in the court.
Holy smokes. Listen, Scott, before we let you go, got to ask you about some news that sort of broke early this morning. We are hearing that the former Vice President, Mike Pence, is going to be holding a rally in Georgia for Governor Brian Kemp, which really shouldn't be making headlines. But the reason it is because his former President Trump is not backing Kemp at all. Kemp has been very critical of the former president. He's instead backing his opponent. Can we talk a little bit more about the significance of this?
This is a high-stakes proxy battle, in addition to being a high-stakes political primary. It's set for May 24th. David Perdue, the former senator, is the challenger who's been endorsed by Donald Trump. Incumbent Brian Kemp, according to multiple reports, will be endorsed by former Vice President Mike Pence. What a face-off that is for the former president and his former vice president. As it's been reported so far, Governor Kemp is a heavy favorite to win that primary. We'll see if any of this changes based on endorsements, but he's been on a path, a glide path towards winning this primary against former Senator Perdue.
Yeah, and you got to wonder, as we watch people sort of line up for whether it's governor's races or other or midterm elections, if we're going to see kind of more traditional conservative Republicans stacked against endorsing and stacked against, Trump-supported candidates, and how that's all going to kind of like work out in the end. But I know, Scott, you will be there to guide us through it. Thank you very much.